because I know the steps, I know who to call, I know what decision needs to be made, I know how to organize it, I know how to fix it, but none of that tells you whether or not I actually have the capacity to take it on right now. Welcome to the Bounce Back Black Woman podcast. I'm Dell, coach, author, mom, and your sister along this journey of healing, growth, resilience, and living more intentionally. As Black women, we know all too well that life can break our hearts in more ways than one. But here in this space, we heal, grow, rebuild, and bounce back together. Because it's not just you. It's not just me. It's us. Hey there, my friend, and welcome back to Bounce Back Black Woman. You know, I was thinking, and there are a few phrases that carry as much pride and as much weight as the phrase strong Black woman. For generations, Black women have done extraordinary things under circumstances that required extraordinary strength. We've built families, we've built careers, businesses, we've held communities together, cared for children and parents, served in our communities, walked into rooms where we weren't expected to be, and then succeeded anyway, risen, figured out things because sometimes there simply wasn't anybody else coming to figure them out for us. And there is nothing wrong with being strong. I want to say that again. There is nothing wrong with being a strong Black woman. I'm proud of my strength. I'm proud of my resilience. I'm proud of the times that life handed me something that I wasn't sure I could survive. And somehow, with God's help, I did. And you should be too. But lately, I've been thinking about a different question. And it's not how strong are we? I think we've answered that one. The proof is in the pudding. My new question is, what is all of that strength costing us? Because there's a difference between strength being something that you have and strength becoming something that you believe you have to perform. You see, there's a difference between I can handle this and I have to handle everything. You see, sometimes we don't recognize that we've crossed that line until we're exhausted or resentful or disconnected or carrying so much that we don't even remember what it feels like to be able to put something down. And so today I want us to examine the load a little bit. Not because I want you to become less capable, never. And not because I want you to stop achieving, also never. And certainly not because I want you to stop being strong. That's not what this is about. I want us to ask whether we've accidentally defined strength in a way that requires us to carry too much. Because maybe the next level of strength isn't learning how to carry more. Maybe it's learning what you can finally put down. I think one of the complicated things about the strong Black woman identity is that there's so much about it that feels good. People depend on you. You are resourceful. You're competent. When something goes wrong, you figure it out. At work, they know you'll get it done. In your family, you're the one people call. In your friendships, you provide the shoulder and the listening ear. You're the organizer. You're the planner. You're the person who remembers the birthday, researches the solution, schedules the appointment, checks on everybody, and somehow remembers that somebody's child has a recital Thursday at 7. And there's some satisfaction in being that woman. Trust me, I get it. That is until you realize that everybody has gotten very comfortable with you being that woman. And maybe you have too. So when somebody asks, "Do you need help?" your mouth says, "Nope, I've got it." Sometimes before your brain has even considered the question. Because of course you've got it. You always have it. But here's something that I've been thinking about lately. Just because you can carry something doesn't mean that you should. And that brings me to something that I think we often confuse: intellect versus energy. We can know intellectually exactly what needs to be done and still not have the energy to do it. Because, my friend, those are two completely different resources. I can look at a problem and understand it intellectually because I know the steps, I know who to call, I know what decision needs to be made, I know how to organize it, I know how to fix it. But none of that tells you whether or not I actually have the capacity to take it on right now. And I think that capable women sometimes make a dangerous assumption, and that's that if we know how to do it, then we should be able to do it. No, competence is not capacity. You can be completely capable of handling something and still be too mentally, emotionally, physically, or spiritually depleted to carry it out well. Your brain and your intellect might say, "This isn't complicated." But meanwhile, your energy is whispering, "Girl, I just don't have it in me." And I want you to learn to listen to her. Because exhaustion isn't proof that you're incapable. Sometimes exhaustion is simply information. It's your body or your mind or your spirit saying something about this load has to change. And that's difficult when independence is part of how you've learned to survive. I want to talk a minute about independence versus interdependence. I value independence deeply. There's something powerful about knowing I can take care of it myself. I can take care of myself. I can make decisions. I can solve problems. I can support myself. I can navigate my own life. But independence can quietly become something else. I can do this myself then becomes I have to do this myself. And eventually, I don't trust anybody else to do this. Or it's easier if I just do it. Can anybody relate to that? You see, that's where I think we need to talk about interdependence. Interdependence doesn't mean helplessness. It doesn't mean giving away your autonomy. It doesn't mean waiting for somebody else to rescue you. It means recognizing that healthy human beings were never intended to live as islands. I can be capable and receive help. I can support someone and allow them to support me in return. I can contribute and receive. I can know how to do something and still raise my hand and say, "Could you handle this one, please?" My friend, that's not weakness. That's relationship. And sometimes the hardest thing for the woman that everybody depends on is allowing herself to depend on somebody else. So, what are you actually carrying? I want you to think about your own life for a minute. What are you carrying? And don't only think about what's physically on your to-do list, because some of the heaviest things that we carry never appear on a calendar, because they're not the physical things: the job, the house, the errands, the kids, the caregiving, the appointments, the meals, the laundry, the projects. And I could go on and on with the physical things. But then there's the mental load, remembering what needs to happen, when, where, with whom, the planning, the researching, the anticipating, coordinating, keeping track of what everybody else needs. knowing you're almost out of dog food before anybody else realizes that the bag is empty. And then there's the emotional load, worrying about your kids, checking on your friend, managing conflict at home or at work, trying to keep peace in the family with the aunties or the grandparents or the cousins, being the person everybody vents to, the landing place, carrying concern about people that you love, even when there's absolutely nothing you can do to change their situation. And then there's what we carry spiritually, praying for everybody, trying to keep your own faith when you're tired, wondering what God is doing or where He is in that moment, trying to trust when you don't understand, trying to encourage everybody else while privately saying, Lord, I could use a little encouragement myself. And then there's responsibility itself. You know, the weight of knowing, if I don't handle this, who will? That sentence has probably kept more women carrying things long past their own capacity than we realize. Because the load isn't only what you're doing, it's everything that you're holding. And sometimes we're comparing our load to somebody else's Instagram highlight reel. You see, because social media has given us unprecedented access to other people's lives. And it creates this illusion of she does it all. Or at least it gives us access to the parts they choose to show us. Because you see the woman with the successful business, the beautiful home, the fabulous vacations, the healthy meals, the workouts, the marriage, the children, the speaking engagement, the dream job. And apparently she also made homemade sourdough bread on Tuesday morning. And you're thinking, how is she doing all of that? Maybe she isn't. Maybe she has help. Maybe her husband carries half the household. Maybe grandma has the kids 3 afternoons a week. Maybe she has an assistant. Maybe somebody cleans her house. Maybe she has financial resources that you don't have. Maybe that picture was taken 3 weeks ago. Maybe she's struggling with something that you will never see. Or maybe she genuinely has an enormous capacity right now. And if that's true, good for her. But none of that tells you what your capacity should be. We have to stop using somebody else's, everybody else's visible output as evidence of what we should be able to carry. Because we don't know their infrastructure. We don't know their support system. And we certainly don't know their private cost. And sometimes our relationships pay the price. Now, this may be the uncomfortable part, so buckle up. Because being the person who handles everything can become part of how we relate to other people. Sometimes we complain that nobody helps us, while we make it almost impossible for anyone to help us. Because we say things like, no, that's okay, I've got it. Or don't worry about it, I'll handle it. And then 6 months later, we're screaming, why do I have to do everything around here? My friends, sometimes people believe us when we tell them we've got it. And sometimes we become so accustomed to competence that somebody doing something differently than the way we would do it feels like they're doing it wrong. And so we take it back. We redo it. We correct it. We stop asking. Or we don't even let them do it in the first place. And eventually, everybody around us learns she'll do it. And that dynamic can damage marriages. That dynamic can damage friendships. That dynamic can damage relationships with adult children, with siblings, and even relationships at work. Because there's a difference between being dependable and being unable to receive ever. There's a difference between leadership and control. If your strength never allows another person to ever contribute, eventually you'll find yourself surrounded by people while still feeling completely alone in carrying your life. And I don't want that for us, my friend. Maybe strength looks different now. Maybe the question isn't, how can I become strong enough to carry all of this? Maybe it's, why am I carrying all of this in the first place? And then the questions that come underneath that: what belongs to me and what can be delegated? What can be shared? What can wait? What am I carrying because nobody else will? And what am I carrying because I never actually have given anybody else the opportunity to carry? What am I carrying because it's genuinely my responsibility? Or what am I carrying because somewhere along the way I decided that needing help would mean I wasn't strong? My friend, you have already proven that you're strong. You don't have to keep exhausting yourself to maintain the evidence. Maybe strength at this stage of your life looks like asking or receiving, delegating, resting, saying no, allowing somebody else to show up, or simply admitting, I can do this, but I don't have to be the one to do it. That's not surrendering your independence. That's embracing interdependence. And maybe that's one of the healthiest forms of strength that there is. There's a passage in Exodus 18 that I love for this conversation. Moses is trying to handle everything for the people himself, and his father-in-law, Jethro, watches him and essentially says, this isn't good. You're going to wear yourself out. And he tells Moses that the work is too heavy for him to handle alone. Now think about that for a moment. Because Moses was capable, he was called, and he was leading. And still, the load was too heavy for one person. Being called to something didn't mean that he was supposed to carry every part of it by himself. And I think some of us need that same reminder. God can give you strength without asking you to prove it by refusing help. Sometimes the provision isn't more strength. Sometimes the provision is other people. And maybe receiving that help requires your faith too. So here's your challenge for the week. I want you to identify one thing, just one thing, we all have one, that you're carrying that doesn't have to be carried by you alone. Maybe it's something practical you can delegate. Maybe it's something emotional that you can finally share with somebody that you trust. Maybe it's asking your partner for help instead of waiting on them to just notice. And you know we all do that. I shouldn't have to ask. Just ask. Maybe it's telling a friend, actually, I'm not okay right now. Maybe it's paying for help if you have the resources to do that. There's no shame in that. Maybe it's simply allowing something to go undone. And that's a whole episode in itself. And before you automatically say, it's just easier if I do it myself, I want you to ask, easier for who? And at what cost? Because the goal isn't to prove that you can carry everything. The goal is to build a life in which you don't have to. Now, speaking of not doing this life alone, I want to invite you to something that I have been thinking about and praying about and planning for a while. On September 21st, Earth, Wind, and Fire Day, I am hosting our first Bounce Back Black Woman Kitchen Table Conversation live. If you listen to our first inaugural Kitchen Table Conversation on the podcast, you already know the spirit behind them. But this time, I want you at the table. This is going to be a live virtual gathering where we can talk, connect, reflect, and have the kind of honest conversations that are difficult for me to have through a podcast microphone alone to all of you. I'll share more about it over the next few weeks, including how to register, what you'll need to do or plan for. But for now, I want you to simply save the date, September 21st. And yes, you'll remember. Because sometimes we don't need another thing to carry. Sometimes we need a table where we can finally put some of it down. So until next time, my friend, I want you to remember that life is short and you can bounce back. It's not just me. It's not just you. It's us. Well, that's it for today, my friend. I really hope this episode inspired, encouraged, or just plain comforted you. If so, please share it with a friend who might be struggling in her own healing journey. And if you take a moment to leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts, you'll help other women find encouragement through their heartbreak. Remember that God is holding your hand along this journey. And guess what? I'm holding the other. Life is short, so bounce back, Black woman.